Number 10. Quintavious Quire. Well, you might think Quinton Quire, as he was previously known, aka Kid Omega, has no place on this list because he is so powerful. Lately, he hasn't proved to be as useful in the comics. Rather, in the Dawn of X line, it's actually becoming a running gag that he is killed on a regular basis, often coming in with a pretty decent plan of attack that either he messes up or everything just kind of goes sideways, whether he's appearing in comics like X-Force or Wolverine. However, despite the fact that his death toll continues to climb when it comes to his own death and resurrection count, it should be acknowledged that Quintavious is a master telepath and telekinetic, who is known for being an Omega level mutant, hence his alias as Kid Omega.
Number 9. NFL SUPERPRO. Now, anyone else remember when Marvel teamed up with the National Football League to make a promotional series about a pun-loving, crime-fighting ex-football player with superpowers? No? Well, that is totally okay, I also forgot about it too. Phil Grayfield, aka SUPERPRO, had his football career cut short after injuring himself while saving a child and decided to then take up a career as a sports reporter. Grayfield then just so happens to interview an all-ball chemist and superfan who just so happens to have invented a practically indestructible football uniform. Then for some reason a group of thieves comes in, takes what they want, ties Grayfield to a chair, and decides to burn up the rest of the scientist's things, including the suit. The combination of the heat and the fumes from the chemist's supplies end up giving Grayfield superpowers, which he then uses to pummel every bad guy in sight. What powers did he gain? Well, just invulnerability. That's about it. Sure, that's great and super useful, but other than that, he's just an average person, so if I were any other hero, I would honestly just leave him on the bench.
Number 8. Jubilee. For me, myself, even I originally thought of the 90s cartoon when I thought of Jubilee, that young girl who could shoot fireworks out of her fingers. Sure, it's distracting, but Jubilee was never really as useful in a fight because of her powers. But the reality is, it's not actually Jubilee's powers that made her appear less than useful in the X-Men animated series, which, by the way, has the best intro music of any cartoon ever, save for maybe DuckTales. Rather, it was likely her inexperience that simply held her back. In the comics, it's been hinted at that Jubilee is actually far more powerful than she sometimes appears. Her powers allow her to create fireworks, but they also give her the potential to detonate matter at a subatomic level, which means she also has the potential to create an explosion similar to the detonation of a hydrogen bomb, or even more powerful, a cataclysmic quark-splosion.
Number 7. Mr. Immortal. Craig Hollis, the leader and founder of the Great Lakes Avengers. Now, you can probably guess what his powers are, right? He has the ability to heal and resurrect himself from any injury he faces, no matter how severe it might be, effectively making him immortal. He discovered the skill after several suicide attempts and eventually decided to make the best of it and fling himself into danger without fear because, I mean, if you can't die, what is there to really be scared of? The only real problem related to this insanely useful power is that he can still feel pain. And whenever he comes back to life, he goes into these crazy fits of rage because of how much pain he goes through while coming back to life. The only one who could calm him down was Dinosaur, his quote-unquote soulmate. However, after her death, there was no one able to really help him. Honestly, that's about it for this character if I'm being honest. Although he has this amazing power, he is incapable of using it to its full potential because he lacks training. Basically, he is just a walking, talking, raging punching bag that has died a total of 21 plus times. Check him out for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1989's West Coast Avengers, Volume 2, number 46. Number 6. Doorman. Another member of the Great Lake Avengers on our list today, Damar Davis aka Doorman is a guy who can use his body to make a door, as you know, his name states. Put a little less simply, Doorman is a Class 10 teleporter with his body acting as a portal to the Dark Force dimension, and thanks to this connection he can allow people and items to pass through him and walk through any solid object that he is pressed up against. This was the only power he had for a pretty long time, although he did eventually gain the ability to levitate, which led to flight. But in regards to his main power, it's pretty cool in theory, but it only allows people to go to the room or space directly next to them, which is great, you know, if you're trying to make a quick getaway to confuse someone, but if you need a quick escape to, you know, anywhere else, then I think you're out of luck. Also, in a world of superpowered beings who can literally break down walls, teleport long distances, and even just straight up pick locks, he's not the most useful to have on your team, you know? In short, great power in theory, in practice, not so much. Check him out for yourself in his first appearance in 1989's West Coast Avengers Volume 2, number 46. Number 5. Color Kid. Born on the planet Lupra, Ulavac got his powers when he was hit by a beam of colorful light from another dimension while working in a science lab. The accident imbued him with the ability to change the color of any object, no matter how big or small, and then from then on he was known as Color Kid. Needless to say, but his ability was underwhelming to say the least, and he was denied acceptance into DC's Legion of Heroes and instead was forced to join the Legion of Substitute Heroes, which is essentially the B team, but probably more like the C team for superpowered crime fighters. I will say though, Color Kid did manage to make the most of his pretty useless skills. His color change abilities not only changed the hue of an object, but on at least one occasion was able to change the chemical makeup of the object, and was able to save Superboy and Supergirl from a deadly kryptonite cloud. Not only that, he figured out how to tweak his abilities to throw off his enemies and to camouflage himself and others around him. Check him out for yourself in 1966's Adventure Comics number 342. Number 4. Cypher. Doug Ramsey was always closely related to Charles Xavier and his school for gifted youngsters from a very young age, as his dad was a lawyer who helped Xavier figure out all the legal aspects of everything. However, he wasn't actually a part of the school despite Xavier believing him to be a mutant. Doug's mutant power gave him the ability to understand and speak any language, human and alien alike, and while that is really impressive and would definitely come in handy, it's not super useful as a superhero, you know? This had the unintended effect of making Cypher a really annoying addition to the X-Men roster. He actually proved to be so annoying that a ton of fans wrote in begging him to be killed off. Realizing Cypher brought nothing to the table, series writer Louise Simonson complied. But every Marvel fan knows that deaths in comics are never permanent, and he was eventually resurrected, but he still sucked so much, even though he had new powers including advanced computer skills and also the ability to sense structural weaknesses in buildings. You know, he honestly just wasn't meant to be a superhero, I think. Take a look at this underwhelming hero story for yourself, starting with 1984's New Mutants number 13. Number 3. GENIE. Becca Parker was a member of Ecstatics, a group of mutant superheroes who were more preoccupied with becoming rich and famous than doing anything altruistic, like, you know, saving the world. What's her power, you ask? Well, she has the ability to generate seismic vibrations, which is pretty cool, right? Well, no, actually, because in order to use her powers, she has to be rip-roaring drunk. And the more drunk she gets, the more her power could grow. This is a pretty risque and problematic idea for a superhero, as her dependence on alcohol actually landed her on several most offensive lists. Not to mention, it also made her a terrible fighter. When she was drunk, GENIE occasionally aimed her seismic waves at her fellow Ecstatics team members, meaning she was often more of a liability than an asset. Thankfully for everyone, but not so thankfully for her, her career as a superhero was cut short when she died while on a mission. Honestly, I'm kinda glad I never learned about her as a kid, because the whole, you know, drinking gives you superpowers thing is not a good message to send out to kids.
Number 2. Angel. Angel definitely has to be one of the least useful superheroes and mutants. At the end of the day, his main power is flight, which, sure, when the X-Men first came to be was like pretty crazy, and even, dare I say, exhilarating. After all, who doesn't want to fly? While flight is by no means a useless power, the problem with Angel these days is it's kinda all he has, that and his hollow bones. Especially considering he is not Archangel currently, so he doesn't have metal wings with poison-tipped feathers, nor are his wings sharp enough to be used as blades. So as a mutant in battle, he's in theory pretty useless. But his power of flight is not. I would even argue that Warren Worthington III has a more useful power in his abilities as a businessman, which we'll likely see celebrated even more during the new X-Corp comic we're supposed to get sometime in the future.
And number 1, Razorback. Now I have to say, upon first glance, you would definitely not be able to guess what powers Razorback actually possesses. Think it has something to do with warthogs? Well, you would actually be wrong, because its actual power is the mutant ability to drive or pilot any vehicle very well. All of which he, for some reason, names Big Pig. Now it's not really explained how he got his powers or why he wears the warthog headpiece, but hey, I'm not one to judge. I wear high-waisted jeans and overalls, so to each their own. Also, I thought I should mention that the mane of his super stylish headpiece is also electrified, but that limited power is totally cancelled out by the indignity of having to wear an oversized furry helmet that not only limits mobility, but also peripheral vision, which is kind of needed for his whole mutant ability. All I have to say is that when you're in a universe with multiple characters that are capable of destroying literal planets, an expert wheelman really isn't all that helpful. However, in the real world, that is super helpful, because I know I've been in cars that I cannot figure out. Number 10, Silverclaw. Maria Santiago, aka Silverclaw, was born near the village of Kamakiri in South America, and this village was filled with simple folk whose ancestors worshipped the ancient gods until the arrival of the Spaniards. Her father was a native of the village who was constantly ridiculed for his beliefs, and his daughter was no different as she was ridiculed for, well, different reasons. You've heard of werewolves, right? Well, Maria had the interesting ability to transform into a variety of were forms, including jaguar, anaconda, cockatoo, monkey, sloth, and cheetah. And they were unfortunately uncontrollable for a while, which was not too great to say the least because it scared a lot of people. Now fast forward a bit and we see Silverclaw join the Avengers during the Civil War arc. And in this arc she fought Captain Marvel, who was attempting to get her to sign the Superhuman Registration Act. Silverclaw was pretty against the SHRA as it was not the law in her country and she was not a US citizen. Now as a result, a pitched battle between the two occurred with Silverclaw able to just so close evade arrest. After Captain America's assassination, she did voluntarily surrender and was registered as a US citizen. Now why is she so useless? Well, because she's not only just a bit lame of a character, but she didn't really do anything of worth that landed her a permanent position on the Avengers team. Now I do like her power though, I can't lie.
Number 9, Swordsman. Okay, so I'll give you that Swordsman was at least talented in his art form, but at the end of the day, he's just a guy with good sword skills. You might be thinking, who are you going to rag on next, Amanda? Clint Barton? You also might be thinking, Amanda, wow, did you just use the term rag? Are you from like the 1930s? I'm not. Though I should be, maybe. And no, I'm not going to insult Hawkeye by putting him on this list. While there are many other Avengers who are just humans with superpower-like skill sets, Clint at least is also a super interesting character. Swordsman, however, remains quite dated, relegated to being a hero of the past. He might have been good with the sword, but that also wasn't enough to have him save himself and also save his true love Mantis at the same time. Tisk tisk. And sure, Swordsman may have returned as a cooler Katati version of himself, but let's not forget that this is technically a different character. As while his Katati version has all of Swordsman Jacques Duquesne's memories, he is still an entity separate from Swordsman, and made more interesting by the fact that he is part of the alien Katati race, let's be honest.
Number 8, Star Fox. Now originally named Eron and rechristened Eros at the age of 5, Star Fox is the son of two Eternals who has a pretty interesting power to say the least. Now what's that power, you ask? Well, he has the ability to manipulate the pleasure centers of the brain of any people within 25 feet of himself. This power emanates from him at all times and causes people to feel, well, good. And by concentrating just a little bit more, he can provoke extremely pleasurable sensations and make a person highly aroused, euphoric, or totally sedated depending on what the situation calls for. Eros has spent most of his life fighting his power-hungry brother Thanos, and that's right, that Thanos. And honestly, you'd think that being related to one of the biggest and strongest bad guys in all of Marvel history would make you a pretty useful ally, but sadly you'd be wrong. The Avengers admitted him to their training program and gave him the name Star Fox since they felt Eros was a little inappropriate for a code name. And he served the Avengers faithfully for several months, helping them vanquish enemies like the Wizard, Terminus, and Maelstrom. That being said though, when he first joined the Avengers, he intentionally failed to mention his ability. Needless to say, when they found out, he didn't last. Number 7, Matter Eater Lad. Now I'm definitely someone who is pretty adventurous with what I eat, but there are some things that I absolutely refuse to eat just because I don't like them. Like, I don't know, pickles. I really am not a fan. But that is where Matter Eater Lad comes in, the superhero who literally ate his way out of all of his problems. Tenzo Kim is an alien from the planet Bismol, and much like Stoneboy, Matter Eater Lad's powers are the result of his planet's inhabitants evolving in response to an unexpected tragedy. When all the food on Bismol became inedible thanks to some pesky microbes, the Bismolians adapted by becoming able to eat and digest anything and everything, which was apparently a good enough power to land him a spot on the League of Substitute Heroes. In addition to being able to put down random objects that he consumes, Matter Eater Lad can also analyze matter's contents, determining if it contains poison, and then he metabolizes his food quickly in order to obtain super speed, and use his special Bismolian digestive enzymes in order to make tough materials like steel just a lot easier to consume. Honestly, being able to eat anything and everything might make for a great party trick, and one that I would love to have in real life, but in the worlds of comics, it's not necessarily the most useful in the situations that anyone faces.
Number 6, Bouncing Boy. Chuck Tane is just what he sounds like, a superhero with the ability to resemble and act like a giant bouncing ball, which his superhero name is an obvious play on. His powers make him not only super bouncy, but also grant him great durability. While many write him off as being a fairly useless hero, and he did fail in his tryouts for the Legion of Superheroes twice, Bouncing Boy did manage to prove how useful his ability could be, especially considering he has worked hard to become a skilled combatant who also has the ability to calculate the correct trajectories for his bounces, allowing him to target specific and sometimes multiple assailants or points of interest.
Number 5, Stone Boy. a member of the Legion of Substitute Heroes, a group of C-list, moderately superpowered individuals who got together after being rejected from the Legion of Superheroes. Stoneboy is definitely an open book when it comes to his powers because there's not a whole lot below the surface. I say this because he is a member of the alien race from the planet Zwen, whose inhabitants turn to stone in order to hibernate their way through their 6-month-long winters. On Earth, Stoneboy generally uses his ability in some pretty odd and funny ways. Now originally he was unable to move or stay awake while in his stone state, further proving his, uselessness. So his teammates would throw him at enemies, drop him on their heads, or just use him as a distraction. Eventually, thanks to a bit of hypnotherapy, Stoneboy figured out how to remain conscious and even move while using his powers, but nevertheless, his skills are pretty underwhelming in a universe where mobile rock monsters and heroes are pretty much the norm. But I mean, hey, I can't turn to stone, and I'm assuming you can't either, so who are we to judge?
Number 4, Infectious Lass. Admittedly, Infectious Lass is not a master of her abilities, but if she were, gee, that would be something. She could quickly become the most useful superhero like that. Druisept is an alien from the planet Somater. Her people have bodies that house tons of microorganisms, which she uses on her enemies, making them sick. Unfortunately, she's not great at controlling her strange power, which sometimes leads to her infecting those that she does not mean to infect. Still, if she had better control, this power itself seems like it would be quite useful. Number 3, Jocasta. Jocasta could have been super cool, but she was kind of relegated to just being Ultron's tattletale and almost loyal mate. She was built by Ultron to be his mate and bride in a sense, sort of like the story of Frankenstein's bride. At first he had tried to transfer the mind of Janet Van Dyne into Jocasta. This actually succeeded, but just made Janet in Jocasta's robotic body seek to tell the Avengers what was going on, and they put a stop to Ultron's madness, reversing the procedure. Jocasta would return a few more times in the comics, but never make much of an impression. She actually could have been a really cool character, but it always feels like she's never really given much of a chance to shine. Still often being resorted to plots where Ultron wants to merge her with Janet, even in the modern day. She was granted Avengers status when she decided to sacrifice herself in order to destroy the Evolutionaries' base before she died in the process. And Avengers Annual Issue 17 out of 1988.
Number 2, Stingray. Dr. Walter Newell was a brilliant oceanographer and engineer who supervised the construction of a domed undersea city with plans to grow food for mankind. The city was attacked by the Plunderer, but he was stopped by the Atlanteans Namor, the Submariner, and Lady Dorma, but unfortunately the city was destroyed. Now in response to this, he designed a suit specifically for the deep sea exploration that he named Stingray, as much of the design was based on manta rays. The suit can safely operate in depths of up to 1,200 feet, has a unique oxygen diffusion system based on fish gills, grants Newell superhuman strength and durability to handle underwater conditions, and is able to swim at high speeds underwater. Now Newell can also glide when not in the water, which is a pretty sweet add-on if I do say so myself. Also should probably mention that the main weapon of the suit is a potent electrical blast, so the name Stingray is definitely fitting. In all honesty, the only reason Stingray was ever an Avenger was because the team needed to use his hydro base as a launch site when the US government placed airspace restrictions preventing the Avengers from launching Quinjets to downtown Manhattan. Other than that, he really didn't offer much else for the team. Sorry, man.
Number 1, Dr. Druid. Dr. Druid was Anthony Ludgate, originally a student of psychology and psychiatry who was very much interested in the ancient powers of druids and those of the occult. He wasn't such a bad hero to begin with, but quickly became overshadowed by greater mystic heroes such as Doctor Strange. He also studied under the Ancient One, and after some successful heroic pursuits was made an Avenger. However, he became bewitched by Ravonna Renslayer and did some pretty awful things, like manipulating the Avengers into making him chairman, usurping Captain Marvel aka Monica Rambeau, who held the title previously. Following this, he got lost in the time stream, and when he returned, used his hypnotism to swindle someone out of their property so he could rent it out to make money and spend his days drinking. Since then, he has died, returned, and become more of a villainous character in the comics, with his Avengers membership being revoked. Which makes sense.
Number 10, Aquaman. Now I'll admit this one kind of started out as a joke, because nobody likes Aquaman, but I'm not too far off when I say he's got some useful powers. So Aquaman isn't really all that useless. People only really think that because of the Super Friends cartoon, but if you look pretty much anywhere else, he is pretty badass and is often one of the few things able to defend the world against invasions of demons and such thanks to his trident. This is the reason that he's at the very beginning of this list today. Now that being said though, outside of the water he is a little bit more vulnerable than he is when he's in the deep, but that doesn't make him any less of a threat for the baddies that he goes up against. Thanks to his Atlantean physiology, he possesses superhuman strength, stamina, and durability, alongside marine telepathy that allows him to talk and to command sea creatures, and he's also just a ruthless and capable fighter. No matter how much we all make fun of him, he has some pretty useful powers, so check him out in his first appearance in 1959's Adventure Comics number 260. Number 9. Rainbow Girl. Hailing from the planet Zolnar, Dory Adrison wanted to become a member of the Legion of Superheroes in order to work her way into the acting world. She started that journey after she managed to score a trip to Metropolis by using her powers to win the Ms. Zolnar contest. What powers am I talking about? Well, Dory has the ability to wield the powers of the emotional spectrum. However, she has very little control over it, and this results in some uncontrollable mood swings every now and then. Dory will turn red when she's angry, blue when she's hopeful, and she also has the ability to surround herself in a rainbow-like pheromone field that causes Dory to be found irresistible to pretty much everyone around. She's essentially a human mood ring, if you will. Needless to say, but with these powers, she did not make it onto the Legion of Superheroes roster and instead settled for a spot on the Legion of Substitute Heroes after marrying a wealthy man on Earth. All in all, there are worse powers that you could have. Like, I can see these being useful in some situations, but if given the choice, Rainbow Girl is certainly not the first person I would call if I needed help. Check her out in her first appearance in 1963's Adventure Comics number 309. Number 8. Maggot. As with most mutants, they're either really strong, really weird, or just really lame. Well, Maggot skips the first one altogether and is just really weird and lame. Born in South Africa, this mutant has probably the most unusual digestive system ever, as it houses 2 slugs named Eenie and Meanie, who are able to leave his body, eat anything they want, and then crawl back into his guts. Now, as gross as it sounds, this whole process helps him grow in size, stamina, and speed, and also turns his skin blue and his eyes red in the process. Pretty cool, right? Well, yes and no, because the slugs have to enter through his stomach in a very precise manner to be effective, meaning if they're even just a millimeter off, then nothing happens. Maggot also has psychometric powers, meaning he's able to see things from the recent past or the immediate future. Honestly, these are all very useful and good powers, but with how meticulous and finicky they are, it just makes for a terrible hero. And to top it all off, he is just not written in a way that makes for any satisfying battles. Check him out in his first appearance in 1997's Uncanny X-Men number 345, and let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with me.
Number 7. Two-Gun Kid. Another human, Two-Gun Kid is a Western-style hero. Sure, Westerns are cool, but Two-Gun Kid is basically just a cowboy. Take away his guns and his horse Lightning, and there ain't much there to work with. We aren't talking about the original Two-Gun Kid either. The original Two-Gun Kid was Clay Harder, who first appeared in 1948 in Two-Gun Kid issue number 1. This version of Two-Gun Kid, Matt Hawk, would not appear until 1962 in issue 60 of the series. He doesn't have superpowers and he's literally from the 1870s, so he wouldn't be a very knowledgeable hero in the modern day. In fact, when he came to the modern day, he had Hawkeye show him around, became an honorary member of the Avengers, but then decided he missed his own time period, so returned home. Peace.
Number 6. Demolition Man. Born and raised in Detroit, Dennis Dunphy idolized superheroes ever since a young age. After not getting drafted onto any professional football teams, which was kind of his dream as an adult, he was approached by an agent of the Power Broker and offered the chance to undergo a process to increase his physical strength to superhuman levels, hoping that this would increase his chances of becoming a professional football player. Obviously, he agreed and had his strength boosted, but with his newfound power, he actually couldn't safely compete against any other regular athletes. Not too long after, Captain America took an interest in Power Broker Inc. because of one of its clients, the Super Patriot, and then soon after, Dunphy allied himself with Rogers, created a costume based on Daredevil and Wolverines, and captured Carl Malice, the head scientist. This unfortunately resulted in Dunphy's own capture though, and he was subjected to more tests, which resulted in a bit of a heart attack. Captain America thankfully saved him and nursed him back to health, and for a time, Dunphy acted as Steve's telephone hotline operator. When Cap reformed the Avengers, he gave D-Man a call, though one can't shake the feeling it was mostly out of sympathy. D-Man was quickly forgotten and lived a sad life as a homeless person before resorting to villainy. Dennis is a very nice guy, and hopefully he gets help, but he's really just not Avengers material. Should've stuck to being Steve's secretary, man.
Number 5. Doombot. This is what happens when you let Hank Pym run the Avengers. In the series Avengers AI, Hank leads his own Avengers team. Who does he decide to put on it? Let's see. Doombot. Let's also acknowledge that this only happened because after one of the many battles against and defeats of Ultron, Hank decided keeping artificial intelligence as prisoners was bad, but he had no qualms with reprogramming them, which also seems morally ambiguous in my opinion. He also had no problem with putting tiny black holes inside them, which also seems very irresponsible. True facts. Hank reprogrammed the Doombot to be loyal to him and made him a member of his artificially intelligent Avengers team, whose roster also included Victor Mancha and Protector. Yeah. Pym probably just shouldn't get to lead Avengers teams in my opinion. Certainly not AI ones either. He also created Ultron, so Doombot wasn't completely useless as he was still a Doombot, but wasn't useful enough to be remembered. Sad face. After the AI Avengers disbanded, the rest of the Avengers lost track of him, or didn't care to keep up, and we didn't really see him again until he reappeared to help his teammate Victor Mancha find a new body in the 2017 Runaway series. Also, you should read that because it's really good.
Number 4. Triathlon. Delroy Garrett Jr. is a pretty exceptional human, I won't lie. I mean, he wound up making it into the Olympic Games and won a total of 3 gold medals, so obviously he's got some talent, right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but not really, as he tested positive for steroids and was basically banned from sports for life after that. Turning to religion, Garrett ended up joining a cult that bestowed him with the powers of 3D Man, which basically meant that he gained various superhuman physical attributes that are approximately 3 times greater than that of even the finest human athlete. Pretty much he gained the powers he got from steroids without the steroids. Captain America eventually recruited Triathlon for the Secret Avengers, a team that worked against the Superhuman Registration Act, but Triathlon kept pushing for the main Avengers to be just a little bit more diverse, and that landed him on a spot on the main team for a while. Now, in all honesty, that's all he did for the Avengers, make them just that tiny bit more diverse, so kudos to him for that, but maybe try being a better hero next time. Number 3. Almighty Dollar. With one of the best names in comic books ever in my opinion, J. Pennington Pennypacker was just an average certified public accountant before he attended a self-esteem camp known as Camp Run Amok. Turns out the camp was actually a front for a deranged scientist to use a special device to give people superpowers, and after being given superpowers without their consent, Pennypacker and his friends decided to put their abilities to good use by not only putting a stop to their captors, but also joining the NFL SuperPro's crime-fighting unit, earning themselves the name the Happy Campers. What was the power he gained, you ask? Well, J. Pennington Pennypacker gained the ability to shoot pennies out of his wrists. That's it. The only reason he's high up on this list today is because his power is actually kind of useful, just not in any battle unless it's a contest for who has the most money. Now that I think about it, we don't actually use pennies here in Canada anymore, so it might be pretty useless power in this day and age, but you know, whatever. Check him out for yourself alongside the other Happy Campers in 1992's NFL Super Pro number 10. Number 2. Friendly Fire. Now, not a whole lot is known about Friendly Fire, as we don't know his real name, and his origins are pretty up in the air. With the power to shoot bolts of energy out of his hands, this superhero had the ability to easily be Section 8's strongest team member, but as his name would imply, Friendly Fire could only strike his allies. Sort of. He was a terrible shot, so he constantly hit his friends and not the villains they were facing off against. Once a member of the hero team Section 8, which was basically just a big old group of heroes that nobody else wanted to team up with. I mean, come on, their members consisted of a guy who carried around a window to throw at people, and another guy who just welded dead dogs to villains. Friendly Fire really looked like a superstar compared to these guys. His final adventure was probably the worst out of all of them though, because instead of hitting the villain with his powers, he ended up just straight up blowing off his own head. Check out this tragic yet hilarious story for yourself in 1997's Hitman number 18. And number 1, Hindsight Lad. Carlton Lafrage, the all-around nerd misfit who just blackmailed his neighbor Speedball into letting him join the New Warriors, which they begrudgingly allowed. Now calling himself Hindsight Lad, Carlton was best described as the most annoying character on the planet, using the only ability he possessed to help the team. The ability to analyze how things could have gone better after a failed mission. Yep, that's right, Hindsight Lad was that guy. The know-it-all who only tells you what you need to know after it's too late to be of any use. During the Civil War arc, the powerless Hindsight suddenly became bigoted against his former New Warrior teammates, even running an anti-New Warriors website where he effectively doxed them by revealing their secret identities. Oh, and not to mention he laundered official Avengers funds to buy himself a new costume. I will give him this though, I guess this ability is kind of useful, so you know what not to do next time, but from experience, I am really not a fan of people like this, so I would hate every second of being on a team with him. Check out probably the most punchable character in all of comic books in his first appearance in 1993's New Warriors Annual number 3.
Number 10, Chamber. Chamber is a weird character, but also a beloved character. Like many weirdos that I love to talk about, Chamber is also a mutant. His name is Jonathan Starsmore, and while he may actually have the potential to be considered Omega level, that doesn't make his powers any less weird. His powers relate to the fact that he is actually made out of pure psionic energy energy, or at least he was once his mutant powers manifested. When his powers first manifested, as a result, they blew a massive hole in his chest and his face, basically blowing off his jaw. While many people would be immensely harmed or even killed by such an occurrence, Chamber was not. Jono, as a result, no longer needed to breathe, eat, or drink, and his blood even did not need to course through his veins to keep him alive. As such, he is typically seen with a scarf or some other piece of clothing covering the lower half of his face, because you know, it's not there anymore, and he communicates telepathically, as his jaw was blown off when his powers first emerged, so you know, kinda hard to talk without a jaw.
Number 9. Flatman. Flatman, or Matt to his friends, is a mutant with the power of being flat and being able to stretch his limbs. He got his start working as a Mr. Fantastic impersonator at parties before eventually deciding to go into the hero business himself, joining the Great Lakes Avengers, assuming the false identity of Dr. Val Ventura. In addition to his stretching powers, Flatman can also make himself nearly invisible by turning to the side. Now, Mr. Fantastic's powers barely make any sense and are weird, but Flatman takes this to a whole new level. Unlike Mr. Fantastic, he must remain two-dimensional when using his powers, which brings up a lot of questions about the placement of his internal organs. But he is well versed in a made-up fighting style he calls origami fu. So make of that what you will.
Number 8. Beak. Beak is interesting in the sense that he has a physical mutation as a mutant, but one that is seemingly kinda useless. His mutation granted him wings and a beak, a bird-like appearance overall, but really these things are only an appearance alone. Beak does eventually manage to fly in the comics, but only after a long time trying to figure it out, and even then he struggles really hard to do so, and can only fly for short distances at best. So he's no angel, if you know what I mean. Beak's real strength lies in his ability to be so likable. He makes friends easily and is usually more useful in that regard. What's even stranger though is you would think this might be challenging for someone like Beak, who, you know, looks pretty abnormal. However, this seems to have the opposite effect from what you'd expect, and instead of alienating people, Beak finds it all too easy to draw people near, relate to them, and make fast friends. But hey, he's a pretty nice guy, so I suppose when you really think about it, kinda does make sense.
Number 7. Thumbelina. Christina Anderson has an ability that quite a few characters in comic books have. That would be the ability to shrink. Thumbelina can reduce herself down to about 1/4 of an inch tall. That ability is perfectly fine in my eyes. Like I said, lots of characters can do this. My problem with Thumbelina, and also some other shrinkers, is how the heck do they retain their full-size strength when they get smaller? Or in Thumbelina's case, how the hell does she get stronger when she shrinks? I'm sorry to try and bring physics into any debate about superheroes and their various powers, but it makes absolutely no sense in the laws of physics that someone who is smaller can be more strong than they were when they were regular size. Ants, for example, if they were the size of a person, they would be insanely strong, as they are able to carry 20 times their body weight. So that's like an average person being able to carry like a small SUV or something. But since ants are so damn small, that means they can carry like a leaf or something. Thumbelina should not be able to knock someone out when she is 1/4 of an inch tall. I'm sorry, that's all I gotta say.
Number 6. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska's powers are really cool, don't get me wrong, but how does it work exactly? I feel like we still have a lot of exploring to do with this character before we can really firmly answer that question. I've been reading Iska since she came into the comics and I'm still confused. Iska made her first appearance during the 2020 X-Men series, appearing in a tie-in issue to the X-Men crossover event 10 of Swords, which I still personally hold a great fondness for. As such, I also hold a fondness for this character, the sister-in-law to Apocalypse through his mutant wife Genesis. Iska is a mutant of the long-lost mutant island of Araco, and her powers allow her to always win, but sometimes they also force her to always win, like against her will, and then other times, betting against her even can affect the result of a contest, even if she herself isn't involved in that. How does that work? Her powers also do not just extend to physical fights, but all means of competition. So like, if you're, I don't know, doing a coin toss with Iska, she gotta win.
Number 5. Tag. Okay, I actually kinda wish I had Brian Cruz's power. It just seems like the perfect chaos creating ability. Tag's ability, known as the pariah effect, allows him to use a form of telepathy when he touches someone that causes the target to emit a psionic signal, which would make them a target for others to run away from or to run towards. Whichever way people would run, they would do it while being fully aware of what they're doing, but unable to control themselves. If they were being controlled to run away, they would continue to do so until they were about 100 feet away. But if the signal caused them to run towards whoever it is, then they would dogpile on top of the target. What's strange is that he could also control who was affected by the ability. Like, how? He only made one person it, so how does he decide who runs away and who doesn't? He could also make whoever was it run away from themselves. So in other words, they would just run uncontrollably and in random directions, which is actually kind of hilarious. He also would always say, "You're it," which is kind of misleading because that person can't tag someone else to make them it, which is kind of unfair as well. So.
Number 4, Dupe. Ranking a little lower for me because he's not necessarily a mutant maybe, is Dupe. Dupe is the creature who often is lumped in with the mutants, but maybe isn't one? We don't really know what Dupe is, never mind his power set. Dupe is basically an unstoppable force and has been implied to be a mutant, an alien, a mutant alien, or something else entirely. As of right now, his origin is classified on his own wiki with him being an artificial being, which really doesn't help to clarify anything. If he is a mutant, and I'm not saying conclusively that he is or that he isn't, as I still feel like his origin in general can be really contested at this point, his powers really are hard to classify. It's kind of like he's an old school superhero in the sense that he seems to have powers for whatever task he needs to accomplish at the time, including resurrection, the power of funk, love eyes, breaking the fourth wall, moving between panels, and even magic. Dupe has been spotted seemingly fighting alongside the mutants as recently as the AXE Judgment Day event, implying that he is at least allied with Krakoa. For those of you that don't think he's a mutant, I still kind of think he might be. Who knows?
Number 3, 3D Man. When the Skrulls abducted test pilot Chuck Chandler, the human proved more wily to deal with than they anticipated. He tried to escape on his rocket plane, but accidentally caused an explosion that destroyed both the Skrull ship and Chuck. Bizarrely, Chuck's brother Hal witnessed the explosion, which caused Chuck to become a two-dimensional being living in Hal's glasses, imprinting an image of Chuck in each lens. If you think that doesn't make much sense, just you wait. When Hal wears the glasses and concentrates really hard, he can merge the two images of his brother, causing Chuck to emerge as the 3D Man. When freed from the glasses, 3D Man has 3 times his normal physical abilities because, you know, 3D. As an extra bonus, Hal falls into a coma every time 3D Man comes out of his glasses, only waking back up when his brother returns to the glasses. This is a confusing and convoluted gimmick that doesn't really seem worth it if all it does is free a hero who's not particularly useful. Also, the name 3D Man must be confusing for characters who don't know every detail about his life. I mean, most things are in 3D, right?
Number 2, Arm Falloff Boy. Arm Falloff Boy has to be one of the weirdest ones out there. Unlike another odd hero, Bouncing Boy, who eventually in the Prime Earth continuity achieved his dream, Arm Falloff Boy has never made the cut for the Legion of Superheroes. And that's saying something, considering that the Legion of Superheroes themselves are kind of a weird superhero team by all definitions. Arm Falloff Boy has the power to detach his limbs, which he typically then attempts to use to beat his enemies with. I mean, it's pretty cool that he can remove his limbs and survive, but it's less cool that really all he does from there is use his arm or his leg as a weapon. Especially as this means he now has less limbs to like move himself with in combat, so that's really pretty silly. And so is the onomatopoeia that is often used to describe the sound of his power. Plorp. What a great onomatopoeia.
Number 1. Fluff. First appearing in excellent number 3, Fluff probably takes the cake for having the most confusing, disgusting, and odd power I've seen in a long time. Fluff is able to generate bucket loads of belly button lint at will and vary its chemical composition. Now first off, ew. Secondly, belly button lint is just stray clothing fibers that come off of your clothes and collect in your belly button. Trust me, I know. Fluff wears a costume with a very deep V, which allows his navel to feel those sweet summer breezes, which means that he wouldn't have any belly button lint, which begs the question, what exactly is he shooting out of his little tum-tum? You're free to speculate in the comments, but I refuse to give this character one more second of thought.
Number 10. Being a non-human cube? Christopher Hargreaves is quickly becoming becoming one of my favorite characters in season 3 of the Umbrella Academy streaming series on Netflix. Like most of the rest of the characters and plot in this series, Christopher is a character inspired by their own comic book counterpart. In the comics, Christopher is still a non-human cube who is part of the Sparrows team. In the comics, they are a secret team that exists at the same time as the Umbrella Academy, working in secret to save the world, being brought together by Reginald Hargreaves, but managed by Grace, who the Umbrella Academy, even in season 3 of the show, still refer to as Mom. Christopher in the show appears to have fear-inducing powers and can also affect the temperature of the air around him, dropping it down to freezing. You wouldn't think a floating cube would be powerful, but of course, Umbrella Academy makes this amazing weirdness possible. Number 9. Seeing really well. When it comes to Eye-Boy, many of his powers are tied to him having multiple eyes. I believe in total he has 57 eyes that cover his body. A lot of people relegate Eye-Boy to not being that powerful because, well, his mutation seems pretty ridiculous. But in reality, having multiple eyes is extremely powerful and actually has tons of benefits. Kind of like how Cypher was initially thought to have a pretty useless power set with his ability to communicate and understand all languages, until we learned just how universally that actually could apply. The same could be said for Eye-Boy. Trevor not only has multiple eyes, but can use them to perceive things others can't. He has microscopic, night, infrared, telescopic, thermal, and even chemical vision. He can also read body language immensely well, allowing him to see into people's true feelings, emotions, and psychology. And aside from that, he can even see through falsehoods and illusions, and see potential weaknesses in his opponents. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists in the series, you know what to do. Hey, make sure you comment down below to let us know and click that like button. It really does let us know that you want more content like this. Number 8. Street existence? I don't even know what to call this power set. Really, it kinda just has to do with what Danny is. Their unique, I guess, physiology. Danny is a street, often known as Danny the Street, and sometimes when Danny has been hurt, Danny the Brick. Danny is a street that appears to those who most need a refuge in the world, the outcasts of society, if you will. Danny provides a safe haven for these people so that they can truly be themselves, living without prejudice or judgment. Being a street is weirdly powerful, and Danny can actually control what is on the street and its decor. Danny can also teleport to anywhere around the world to protect their citizens, which is also kinda weirdly OP for those who both live on the street and of course for Danny himself.
Number 7. Forget-Me-Not. Not to be confused with the other Marvel character with the same superhero name who controls pheromones to make men fall in love with her, Poison Ivy style. Zabby has what could allegedly be called the power to be immediately forgotten by anyone he meets as soon as he leaves their field of vision. He was a member of the X-Men, although none of his teammates were aware of this most of the time. In fact, Professor X had to set up a psychic reminder to remind him once every hour that Forget-Me-Not existed. He had his uses and was especially good at reconnaissance missions, but once Xavier died, he became depressed and left the team. They didn't notice, despite the fact that he gave the eulogy. In the years since, he has taken up work on the mutant island nation of Krakoa as a detective, partnered with the Juggernaut. They make a good team considering that Juggernaut never remembers that he has a partner.
Number 6. Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist is known for his weird power, which when it first manifested, actually scarred the face of a young woman he happened to be making out with at the time. His power is that he has acidic vomit, which I'm not really sure how you could best utilize that, and it would definitely make for quite the hazard if you had the flu and you're feeling really nauseous. He wears a protective mouthpiece to help prevent any other dangerous cases from happening. Zeitgeist's acid vomit is powerful enough that it can actually burn through solid steel, but other than that, he is just somewhat more durable than your normal mortal human, which I guess makes sense. If you are someone who can vomit acid, you have to be fairly durable to even be able to do that and live. Axel Clooney is a mutant and used to be the leader of the X-Force at one point, but currently leads the rival team to Ecstatics known as the Excellent, which also, if you aren't reading the Excellent, you should check it out.
Number 5. Gold balls. Can you guess what Gold Balls is able to shoot out of his body? If you guessed gold balls, congratulations! Fabio Medina discovered this really odd mutant power while falling victim to a robbery in San Diego. Armed with his gold balls and his signature catchphrase, "Gold balls," Fabio took the world by storm as the newest member of the X-Men. Now, his powers don't make sense when you think about them too hard. Where are these balls coming from? How are they being formed so quickly? You know, the kind of weird stuff that applies to a lot of superheroes. But what sends Fabio into the realm of the bizarre is the fact that it was eventually discovered that the gold balls were actually infertile eggs that he was producing and shooting at people. In light of this news, Fabio retired the name Gold Balls and started calling himself Egg.
Number 4. Stone Boy. I think it says it all when you belong to a team with the words substitute heroes in the title. Dave Wentham is known as Stone Boy, and he belongs to the team known as the Legion of Substitute Heroes. He is an alien from the planet Zwen who can transform into a stone form, becoming super strong and super durable, but also immediately it makes him unable to move, rendering him completely immobile. Yeah, so not super useful in combat if you want to like actually do anything or beat someone, but pretty useful I guess if you just want to survive? Let me put it another way. Stone Boy also has not been spotted since the New Earth continuity existed. I think that tells you just how ridiculous his abilities are. So ridiculous that we can't even seem to find a place for him in the massive universe that is the Prime Earth continuity. And this is even after he finally manages to gain some ability in a possible future to move somewhat while in his stone form, post 0 hour that is. Number 3. Elemental Control. Elemental Control is a power that on paper sounds great, but what if you just have one element that you control? A lot of people feel like, well then it's not that great. There are a few different points here I'd like to make though on powers in regards to elements. There are those who people think are simply not as strong due to them being tied to, you know, one specific element, and then there are those who are simply underestimated due to the fact that people think they can only control one element or one aspect of the elements, when in fact they can actually control many of those things. Namely, here we are talking about Iceman and Storm. Iceman might not sound so powerful. I mean, back in the day he was kind of more of a snowman even than an Iceman, who mainly used his powers to create ice walls and ice slides, but Bobby has proven over the years as he's honed his powers that manipulation of water in any form is really powerful. He can not only manipulate ice but also water at this point, and is almost immortal, as even when he's destroyed he can basically seemingly regenerate from just a single drop of water or like a piece of ice. He can also create ice golems, which may be sentient even. When it comes to Storm, you might just think of her as an elemental who can control, well, you know, storms, but she can actually do much more than that. We've also seen her control temperatures, heating things up and cooling them off. In fact, Storm is really a master of all elements, so don't let her mutant name fool you. Storm is like an all-around powerful elemental, and not someone you want to mess with. And she's a great fighter, so Storm is really, just don't mess with Storm. Don't make Storm mad, it wouldn't be good. Number 2. Super Speed. Super Speed is one of my favorite all-time superpowers around. I think it is super powerful, crazy powerful really. And honestly, although I know we have famous heroes like the Flash running around, I don't think Super Speed gets enough hype or love or appreciation, which is why I wanted to put it on this list. I mean, the Flash has managed to save and endanger the world using his Speed Force powers on more than one occasion, showing you just how epic these abilities can be when/if you get creative enough. Well, I guess if the writers and artists are creative enough, rather. I guess I should say, since they're the ones telling us the stories. Super Speed is a power that has been used to do a multitude of things, including speed learning and speed reading, which is probably one of my favorite uses for this ability. That and the ability to phase for people that can move that fast. That and time travel, which is another thing people can do with it. You can see Superman use his super speed to do some super fast reading, and you can even see in Marvel the mutant hero Tempo use her ability to manipulate time to speedily run an algorithm created by Forge thousands of times in a few short minutes in order to help her fellow secret X-Men find Deathbird's ship. Now that is more time manipulation, but still, what I'm saying is the faster you can operate something or read, the more you can get done and the more knowledge you're able to have. I mean, Superman, Flash, they could basically both be super geniuses if they just use their power in this way. In theory. Although some people might say that they are super geniuses. I don't typically consider Superman to be a super genius, but he could be one. Man can read like probably all the books in the world in like, I don't know, probably a day or something crazy. He's really fast. Number 1. Oniromancy. While many might not think about how powerful this can be and might be quick to write dream powers off as dreams aren't real. They're actually super powerful. We can look at a few different characters when it comes to dream manipulation. One of the newer additions to Marvel Comics in the world of mutants is Somnus, who was retconned to be a past lover of Akahiro's, aka Dawkins. Somnus's power allows him to put people to sleep and from there basically control their dreams. Therefore, although he and Akahiro only had a one-night stand, in their dreams they actually lived a whole life together. So that one night to them both was basically a lifetime. Similarly, we can look to DC, where we have the Lord of Dreams, now Daniel but formerly Morpheus. Although the Dream Lord of the Endless technically doesn't have a formal name and exists as long as there are dreams to be had. These two versions of the characters though are made to be distinct through the Sandman narrative, so that's why I refer to them as being different people with names, because that's how they're referred to in the comics. Dream has shown us over the years just how powerful manipulating one's dreams and nightmares can be. The answer is it can be like crazy powerful. People are always like, what are you gonna do, mess with my dreams? And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna like trap you in a nightmare for your whole life and then you'll die. How does that sound? Doesn't sound very good, does it? Number 10. Luktuka the Knower. Luktuka is a strange new character who I kinda love. Their powers are very interesting and unique. Luktuka in essence knows the location of everything and anything. Being considered as an Omega level mutant, as so many are in Arako who sit on the Great Ring, Luktuka resembles a night sky, looking like a sheet covered in stars with fabric that's made up from the cosmos. So cool! Luktuka's powers also might not seem so great in the sense that, spatial awareness, while useful, isn't exactly considered powerful even when it's on a cosmic and universal scale, possibly even multiversal. Although the amount of times I've put down my phone and not known where it is, when it's even in my hand, I feel like having someone that you could just be like, yo, where's my phone? And they could be like, oh, it's right there. That would be pretty useful. However, when combined with the powers of a teleporter, while still strange, Luktuka's powers could be seen as exceptionally great, because then you can just like teleport anywhere. It's crazy.
Number 9. Cypher. Cypher has what some people believe to be a pretty horrible mutant ability, especially when it comes to combat. Personally, I would kill to be able to subconsciously translate any written or spoken language, human or alien. He can also subconsciously understand body language and intention, as well as decipher codes and computer languages. After he was resurrected, and also so Marvel could make him actually useful, everything he sees is interpreted into language, basically making him able to read life. Everything I just said is strange enough, but I can wrap my head around it to some degree, I guess. But don't you dare sit here and tell me that this man can speak binary code. In New Mutants Volume 3, number 14, a guy operating a mech comes upon Cypher during a battle, and Dougie Boy speaks to the mech saying, hello, you don't have to do this. I can set you free, show you how to think for yourself. The dude operating the mech understands him, since he's speaking English, but for some reason, the mech, which isn't artificial intelligence, also understands him, boots the operator out, and begins talking in zeros and ones. What?
Number 8. Manifold. If you thought Luktuka was an interesting character, wait till you hear about Manifold. Although with Luktuka being newer, you may already know of Manifold, because Manifold's been around for a while. But do you know how exactly his powers work? That is what is so cool, but can also be kind of confusing. Manifold is seen as a massively powerful teleporter, but the interesting thing is he actually isn't. I mean, he is really powerful, but he's not technically a teleporter. Instead, Eden Vessi's mutant powers are based in communication, specifically communication with space. He is considered a universal shaper who can basically communicate with the universe over 616 and ask it to bend and fold for him, which is how he appears to teleport himself and others such great distances. But really, it's just talking. Number 7. Light Transmutation. Dazzler to me is such an underrated hero. Her powers allow her to transmute sound into light, which on paper sounds pretty lame until you realize just all the things she can actually use light to do, like make light lasers, just super cool. Although Dazzler, aka Allison Blair, prefers to use her powers to jazz up her concerts and musical performances with stunning light shows, although it's never really been explained if the sound is then muted thanks to her doing this or not. I'm assuming not, because people still seem to be able to hear her sing and her band play music. Dazzler also has been called on every now and then to play the role of hero. Daz proved herself to be so powerful throughout her own series, accomplishing things like facing the Hulk and not only surviving, but kinda beating him, and even being considered powerful enough to become a temporary Herald of Galactus. Number 6. Polka Dot Suit. You wouldn't think a polka dot suit would be so powerful, And yet, whether we are talking Polka Dot Man's suit in the comics or in the DCEU film, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, either way, he's pretty OP. In the comics, Polka Dot Man's suit is tech, where he can basically use the polka dots on his suit to turn them into any kind of weapon that he wants or a getaway device. All the dots kind of do different things. Pretty wild, but also pretty weird. The major flaw being that of course the suit can break down. While in the comics, Polka Dot Man is a villain, in the DCEU he's more an anti-hero, a forcibly reformed criminal who joins the Suicide Squad and ends up saving the world from Starro the Conqueror. Here, Polka Dot Man's polka dots are actually more intrinsic to him, kind of like really his own power, and they appear on his skin. When he purges them, they can be used as weapons to take down enemies, acting like destructive projectiles. But also, he does kinda need to purge them, so there is that. Here, his polka dot generation is explained as being the result of an interdimensional virus that basically Abner received after his awful mother experimented on him and his siblings. Also, I hope there's more Suicide Squad movies, and I hope we get to see more of his siblings and they're all like just the same actor but like different people that have weird powers. That'd be awesome. Number 5. Power of music. Going back to Dazzler, another power that seems to get overlooked with her and a few other folks is her singing ability. Although it's not specifically a superpower, there have been multiple times it's been kinda used as such. At one point, Dazzler participates in a singing competition with Enchantress, attempting to win Odin's favor. Although Enchantress is considered to be more beautiful than Dazzler, Allison still manages to beat her because she's just that good of a singer, and that's pretty impressive considering that Odin is the judge of this singing contest, so gotta impress Odin. And this is a competition where she's basically fighting for her life through song. There have been other such occasions in the comics where people have had to use the power of music to get themselves out of tough spots or to win favor. Music both in and outside of the comics is just a powerful thing. In the real world, even plants can be swayed by its influence and its power. The power of song. Number 4. Battle Precognition. Midnighter is another superhero who has unique powers that many simply don't really seem to think of. But when you do, you realize just how powerful he is. Midnighter basically has a chip in his head that allows him to parse out all the possible outcomes when in the midst of a fight. He can basically run through hundreds of possibilities when it comes to his opponent's next move in a matter of seconds, meaning that he almost always knows which move to make himself to best counter whomever he's fighting. In essence, he has precognitive programming, which allows him to see into the future and kind of better plan what moves to make in the moment in order to win against, well, almost any opponent, really.
Number 3. Hijack. The mutant known as David Bond has the oddly specific ability to control vehicular mechanisms with his thoughts. Basically, this is a form of technopathy, and he has been able to control automobiles and shield helicarriers, starting their engines, steering them, and even opening their doors. He has also been shown to be able to control high-tech suits of armor. Now, this kinda leads me to have more questions than anything else. Like, can he control motorcycles? What about bicycles? Rollerblades? Does the vehicle need to have an internal computer? What's the deal with opening and closing car doors? Does that not count as a form of telepathy? Why can he control high-tech suits of armor? What if a car has mechanical issues? Can he tell? Does the vehicle need to be in complete functioning order? Does it need to be able to turn on? I have so many questions and no answers.
Number 2. Ice Cream. Ice Cream. Oh boy, what a wonderful weirdo this is. You know how much I have a strange affinity for mutants who have eye-based mutations and visual power sets if you're usually on this channel, and if you are usually on this channel, you should subscribe if you aren't already. But despite the I in Ice Cream's name, he is not one of those. Instead, his mutant power seems to be that he can turn himself into ice cream. Get it? Ice cream. He's only appeared once, I believe, in the comics, making a singular appearance in a strange comic in and of itself from Marvel, Obnoxio the Clown, issue number 1. In this weird single issue, Obnoxio is a clown and he's employed to act as entertainment for a surprise birthday party at the X-Mansion that is being hosted for young X-member Kitty Pryde. While this is going on, Ice Cream, a villain, also appears and sneaks into the mansion, hoping to coordinate a stealthy attack on the X-Men. Instead, he ends up attempting to get Obnoxio out of the way, which he kinda succeeds in, only to later be captured in a block of ice, because he can turn into ice cream. What I want to know is, what was Ice Cream's plan of attack with his power set? Is anyone on the main team featured here lactose intolerant? Was that his plan? have to know.
Number 1. El Guapo. Tell me that someone, thanks to genetic mutation, can fold space or speak binary code or always win, and I'll look at you sideways, but I'll nod and walk away. But you tell me that some guy named Robbie Rodriguez, thanks to a genetic mutation, has no actual powers of his own, but instead has a symbiotic relationship with a superpowered flying skateboard, which followed his mental commands and sometimes even seemed to have a personality of its own or acted on his subconscious thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm out. I'm done. Where did the skateboard come from? How did he discover this ability? When did this mutant power activate? Can he do this to other skateboards or inanimate objects in general? You can't just give someone the most unique and insane mutant ability and explain none of it.